And welcome to the Two Step Podcast. I'm Bag,
And I'm Meg.
and today's episode is going to be on virtual reality. Virtual reality is kind of a strange topic for a lot of people because most people haven't really experienced it. I on the one hand have, and I don't think you have, right, Meg?
No, not really.
Okay. Yeah, so it's one of those things when you try it, it feels much different than when I originally thought about it. I was like, how is this going to feel? Am I going to feel actually immersed? And one big thing about virtual reality is its use in gaming. And one of the biggest problems that a lot of people have with its use for gaming is the price tag. The price tag is going down, but I mean, like, what was the cost of it when it came out? Like, it was like $800 or
Yes,
something,
I mean,
right?
but that's normal for early adoption. That's what you say. It's like when 4K monitors come out, and in New Zealand, a 4K monitor local currency was like $4,000, right?
Yeah,
Which
it's a
adjusted is like
ridiculous price.
2 to 3,000 US. No, yeah, but that's what you get for cutting edge technology. You pay the premium. It's a lot more manageable now, because I mean, not for me in New Zealand, but in America, I think it's what, $400 to $600 now, slightly
Something like that. Yeah.
slightly better.
Um, Depending on what you're getting, I mean, like you can get like a
Yes.
4K TV for like around that range, and a monitor for like a 4K good quality monitor that has actual decent settings and stuff like that. It's probably in the 500 to 600 range easily. Um,
Yes, and that's the same with VR. The Oculus, for instance, is aiming itself to be the cheaper entry level, and the Vive
mhm.
is aiming itself to be slightly above that, despite both of them being entry level, since there is no other
Yeah.
competition, right?
There's no other like level for to
No, there's
hold
nothing
them
better.
against.
There's no comparison, so it's just like you can get this or you can get this one that's slightly more expensive.
And the other issue is that like as VR gets more advanced,
Mm-hmm.
there's gonna need to be you're gonna need to purchase like you've probably seen those things where like it's like the pad that you stand on and you like walk around, right? I mean, like
Yes.
how big is it gonna get to the point where you need like an entire room dedicated to just being your VR room?
So
I mean, because it's gonna get expensive.
when people dream of having an entertainment room where it looks like a
Mm-hmm.
mini cinema, that's what it's gonna be like, but without any seating.
Exactly.
Right? It's gonna have
Yeah,
to
it's
be.
just gonna have the one little spot where you can stand in, and you've got the
Unless you
sliding
have
floor and all that stuff.
unless you have like a treadmill kind of thing where you can just walk endlessly. There was a guy, I remember the first time I saw a guy play Skyrim VR, and he was using Wiimotes as the controllers with the VR, and he was in this weird fucking like, it looked like a child's playpen, and
Okay.
it would just bend back and forth so that he couldn't extend past it, so he'd have to walk on the spot. But it's not natural, right? You know when you're walking on the spot, as opposed to when you're actually walking in a line forever, right? When you walk to the
Yeah,
shop,
because you've got that feedback of the resistance of you pushing against whatever you've got in comparison to just going.
yes, right? There's nothing. There's no. I'm not a physics person, right? So there's kind of difficult to explain, but you know the difference when you're walking at a
Mhm.
point, standing still, right? Like exercise, and when you're walking to a destination. Because, of course, when you're walking to a destination, you have things like the wind resistance and you're pushing forward. But when you're standing still, you're not. You're just moving your
Yeah,
legs.
I think there's a word for that. I don't know what it is. It's what they call the sixth sense. It's like the feeling of knowing where your body parts are and how they're moving. I don't remember the name for that though. If anybody can think about that, put it in the comments. Anyways, the
Yes.
uh the next the thing that when I think about all of that is the actual feeling of being immersed in the game. So that was a big problem that I had at first. It's really hard to get immersed, and most of that I feel is on the content side. Because for me, when I'm playing video games, it doesn't matter if the graphics are bad, if the graphics are good, if the interface is bad or good. If I can still get immersed in it if I like the story and everything else about it,
Well, yes, because that's the thing, right? I can go back and and we were talking about this before off camera, but off whatever, that I can play Deus Ex forever, over and over and over again since it's my favorite game, and I will always feel immersed, regardless of the fact that the graphics are clearly outdated and were relatively outdated when it came out. It doesn't matter though, because I like the game. And any game will do that, right? We always had this obsession with graphics, because I remember when Doom came out, everyone's like, "Oh, Doom! It looks so realistic! It's the most realistic looking game ever!" As if there's any other games that were like Doom, bar anything, because there wasn't, right? But people thought that was looking realistic. So it doesn't matter. The graphics could look like anything, and you'll get immersed to that. So I don't think the graphics for virtual... The time I have spent with virtual reality, the small amount of time I spent, you're not focused on the graphics. You're focused on the physical experience of having a point of view perspective of whatever you... Like, you're always in a point of view perspective. Obviously, if you play a first-person game, that's POV. But it's really different when the point of view is right up into your face and not 5 inches away from it with a big black box of your monitor. And that's immediately...
Yeah.
That's immediate. You know that. There's a massive difference.
Like the biggest, when I was first doing the VR, the most immersed that I felt in the entire experience was actually the tutorial. And it was the tutorial for the Oculus. So in the tutorial for the Oculus, in comparison to like the games and stuff that you could download, like I tried it with a couple of games, but I had a really weird syncing issue with the cameras that it uses.
Yeah.
So I couldn't really, it just didn't work for me. Go ahead.
I think it helps that the tutorial is designed with VR in mind, and a lot of the games that have VR, right, are not. So they're not designed for VR, they're just ported to it. So they work with VR, but they're not made for VR.
Even even like some of the ones that were made for it that are like on the VR like shop or whatever, I didn't get that full immersion feeling, because so the environment for the tutorial is you're kind of in like a trailer almost, like think of just like a simple home trailer, like an RV or something like that, right? And you're standing at a desk, and there is a floating it's like a floating robot type thing. It kind of looks like WALL-E.
Yeah.
That's floating around, and you're just interacting with it, and it's like showing you like you have these little cassette tapes that you can take, and you can put it into a machine, and it'll like 3D print items that you can use. Like it gives you like a bottle rocket that you can shoot at the robot and he'll dodge it and stuff like that.
Okay, I think I've seen videos of this.
Yeah, and in that environment, I felt extremely immersed. Like I hit that I hit the like what they call like the flow state, where you're 100% in it, and you don't think about time, you don't think about what's around you, you're just in it. That was the only game that I actually felt 100% in it. Like I tried doing like Fallout VR, and I tried doing Skyrim VR, and I felt it felt bad. Like when I was in it, it didn't feel immersive. But that tutorial, I felt 100% immersed.
You know that on the topic of that level of immersion, that's probably going to be the biggest side effect. Now, I know we're going to talk about side effects in more detail, but that's going to be the biggest side effect. The disassociation from reality, right? Because let's say you play a game in VR that has no time cycle. There's no day or night cycle. Or if it does, it's not based on reality. So the cycle is faster than what would be experienced in real life. Obviously, that's common for gameplay reasons. That's going to be extremely jarring for the average person. And even if you get into that flow where you become fully immersed, right? If you are fully immersed, if VR gets to the state where we actually feel as if we're in this world, right? How are we going to know to turn off? That we're not, that we're still in the, we have to be very consciously aware that we're still in this world. And some people aren't. People lack self-awareness as it is. It's not going to be...
just in their day-to-day life.
Yeah, exactly. People are just not self-aware and they're not aware of the things that go around them, right? They have a very small window that they actually notice, and everything that's outside of that window is nothing. They don't see it. So imagine that in a space that doesn't exist, right? So I guess when you feel hungry, you might start realizing it. But how long is that
Yeah.
going to take?
And that reminds me of there was a what is the name of it? There was a game that came out recently that was basically it almost felt like it was set in the Blade Runner universe, but it's not. It was about a guy where it was like a police force where they could take this thing and plug it into your neck and they could experience your memories.
Yeah.
So the whole situation was is you were in this like hotel and you were trying to find your son, and you're one of these people. What was it called? Anyways, the name doesn't matter. But what it would talk a lot about is how they would do like an augmented type reality thing where you could have the room was completely barren, right? You had
Yeah.
like a chair and like a sofa and a bed, but you could use this augmented reality device and it would make an environment around you. Like instead of the sofa just being a sofa, it looked like a braided sofa out of like twigs or something like that. Like, something that you'd see in like, I don't know, like an elf house,
Yeah.
and just things like that. And there was also a guy where you talked to him through through his like little intercom on his door, and he's talking about how he's a space captain in Star Trek, and he's very concerned because you're telling him that no, that's just you're in virtual reality and you're just a man sitting in a chair, and he physically and mentally believes that he is this captain of this Starfleet, and it's worrying thinking about that.
Well, that reminds me of like Sword Art Online.
Yeah, sure. The full dive technology where it
Yeah.
cuts off the senses and you experience the senses that the VR device gives you.
Yes, but you have to be there because if you're not in there, you die.
Yeah.
Right? And that's similar to things like The Matrix. It's exactly like The Matrix, right? Because that's one of the first movies to have ever experienced with the concept of virtual reality. Now, people won't necessarily have known it as virtual reality at the time, but that's what it is. They're
It's
in a reality
literally
that's
virtual reality.
virtual. Yeah. And I mean, the machines stimulate everything. All right. If you die, we all know the concept. You die in the Matrix, you die in real life purely because your brain suffers. It's too much psychological trauma. I'm trying to think of that movie that recently come out last year that was shit and based on a book that was good.
That's not very descriptive, unfortunately. So I can't
Hang on.
really.
I'm looking for it. It's fine. Because it came out recently. Now. But yeah, I'm not. That does lead to us with the haptic feedback as well, though. Haptic feedback and how would that be?
Yeah, like the other senses. Like, are we gonna? Because at first, it's obviously gonna be a physical interface. We're not gonna be able to do what Elon Musk wants and put a neural mesh on our
Yet.
lower part of our brain. Yeah, that's not
Yet.
going to happen anytime soon.
No, exactly. So for the now, there is going to be a sort of disconnect because you're going to have to use a controller. Even if there is motion sensor, you're going to have to move in the real life. You can't just think about it and have it do, right? That's not again like the Matrix.
Yeah, they're not able, because I think it's going to go like we're going to be in like a full body suit to experience the feel and touch of everything, and it's going to use electric shock to make the muscles or whatever feel the certain things. And then there's going to be a big jump, I think, when they have to.
I found out the movie.
Oh, you found the name of it?
The
What
Dark
is it?
Tower.
Okay, the Dark Tower.
Yeah,
I don't
so
know a lot about that movie, but I
movie was
have
crap.
heard the name.
All right, The Dark Tower is a Stephen King novel. Anyone who has heard of The Dark Tower will probably know of The Dark Tower. It's a really good Stephen King novel. Really shitty movie. All right, but it does use virtual reality as its concept.
Okay.
But anyways, back to haptic feedback.
Yeah, so there's gonna be a big disconnect, and it's probably gonna be like an ethical problem too about
because of pain. How
yeah,
much
like
is
pain
too much?
and cutting off senses and redirecting them. It's like at that point when your senses are cut off from the real world and the senses are transferred to whatever virtual reality you're in.
This is another side effect, yes, because again, disassociation. There is a serious risk to your body when you are not, especially if they ever got those neural synapses to work where you are transferring feeling from the real world to the emulated world,
Virtual
right?
world.
Yeah. If you don't feel anything on the outside, you're basically fucked. Because it's different in movies. It's way different in movies where they have somebody else there to monitor them. You can't expect to have that with a video game. That's not practical at all. So I don't think what Elon Musk wants is truly practical, actually. I think it's possible in the future. I don't think it's particularly practical in a gaming environment or even necessary. Because I don't think you need that much. I don't think
you're gonna have that like legal issues, and it's like,
Well,
how much control can we give them?
The thing is too is that things like the vibration on a controller are really good. The Switch, for instance, has really good vibration feedback.
Oh yes, absolutely it does.
Fantastic. And that's all you need. You don't need to actually feel pain. You don't need a physical shock. You don't need much feedback to know that something's happening. If I play Call of Duty in virtual reality and I get shot, right, I only need to feel a jolt in the area that I get shot at. And it doesn't, right? It doesn't have to be a massively big thing. It just has to be an indicator. But I will say that things like smell and taste and feeling, like touch, those are things that you may want to have on a 1-to-1 scale. Primarily because those things have more control on the user. When you touch something with your hands, or when you taste something, right? Or when you smell something, those are things that are probably less likely to cause risk and more likely to have a massive amount of immersion for the user.
Yeah, because you're so used to experiencing the world in 5 dimensions of, sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. You're so used to that when you start taking those away, it affects it.
We already know that VR is going to be a massive success because porn is already on it. All right?
I mean, that's the way that anything goes. Yes. That's one of the main attributors to human invention and progress, is the fact that we have it built into our brains that we need to procreate. So,
yes, exactly. If it doesn't have porn, it's fucking useless. All right? It's a dead technology. That's the rules. That's the rules. All right? Literature had porn. Film had porn. There was audio porn. There are porn on the internet. All right? There are porn video games. Now there is porn in VR. Finally, there you go. It's instant success.
It's the natural progression. I mean, where else is it gonna go?
There was porn in VR before people thought VR was fucking cool. All right? Before people were seeing it at shit like E3, Pornhub thought, yes, let's fuck on that. There you go. It's already, and for those purposes, you're gonna need haptic feedback, all right? All right? You're gonna need it. Because the reality is, yes, you can buy an Oculus Rift and a fleshlight, all right? Fine. But that's not the same as having the two things in the same device, all right? Yeah. Oh man, could you imagine that? The Vive just comes out with a fucking porn edition, adults only.
Okay, let's move on to the next topic here. Let's not spend too much time on that. We were talking about side effects earlier. So one of the biggest side effects that I actually experienced myself is so there's this feeling that you get. So with the new VR devices, they come with hand modules, right? Like where you like the controllers that you hold, and they have it set up to where when you move your fingers and press certain buttons on the controllers, it emulates that in the virtual space. So like if you're holding it and you're doing like a gun shooting pose, there's like a trigger there, and when you hold that trigger on the side of the controller, it shows as your finger pointing out.
Yeah, I've seen this. Yeah. Right? Yeah, I understand that.
My biggest side effect that I had with VR was that when I left VR after a long series of seeing my hands in VR, my actual hands did not feel real.
So when I was researching about the topic just before we started the podcast, that was a psychological effect. Right? That's a psychological side effect of VR. So yeah, I think that's a pretty damning problem too. Okay, but that's the disassociation part because you've become so attached to this virtual world, which is not a one-to-one parallel of the real world. And then you get out of it, and now you have to reattach yourself to a different world.
Yeah, so the idea would be is that until that simulation is one to one in all five senses,
Yes.
you're going to have that disassociation. And once we hit that one to one, the disassociation will actually be gone.
Well, that's like the technology for the eyes, for the way the actual viewport works is not completed yet. It's not there. Because that's the main thing that they're working on right now. They want to get the actual cameras to make it so that you emulate eyesight, and it's not there. So that means, and so a common problem is when people spend too much time in a VR, and again, I have not experienced this. It's really important to know. I do not know what this is like. I only know this from what other people have said. But an issue is when you go into VR for a long period of time and you come out, your eyes are fucked.
I experienced a little bit of it, not too much, but I did experience a little bit of that.
Yeah, it's because I don't know the science behind this, and I can't remember what they called this and what the technology behind it was. I was reading this really recently, actually, like a couple of weeks ago, and it's just a thing because, again, the emulation is not one-to-one, and I think it's going to be worse for anyone who already has eyesight problems. So people like me, who wear glasses normally, and people who wear contacts or whatever, let's not even go on. If you wear glasses, right? It's funny to me too because having tried VR headsets and knowing how they feel, they do not actually fit people with glasses as well as they could have, particularly given that they were probably designed by teams full of people wearing glasses.
Yeah, an interesting note about that before I forget about it is something that I experienced. So my vision isn't perfect, right? Like I have the typical problem where because of looking at computer screens for so long, I can't see at distance very well, right?
Yeah. So you're yeah, I get that.
And you would think that in VR the distance issue would be fixed because it's a screen that's close to you, right? It actually was not fixed for me in most of VR. When things were far away, they were still blurry.
I wonder how that's going to work for me too. Like, could I?
Yeah, because you would think because like something that a friend of mine did when he was because his eyesight's horrible. He can't see up close. He can't see up far. He has to have very very thick glasses. What he would do is if he didn't have it, he'd take out his phone and he'd turn the camera on. And he'd just look at his phone very, very close to his face and use the camera on the phone to move around. Because the picture is perfect. You can always see it because there's no depth in that picture. But in VR, the depth is there. And without, like, contacts or something, I wouldn't be able to see at distance, which is weird to me because the screen is an inch away from your face.
Yes, because I'm short-sighted to the point where I can't see anything beyond an inch of my face. And if something is an inch to my face, there's no depth anymore. So my eyes, and it's too close. So you go cross-eyed trying to focus on anything, right? That's the problem with my eyesight. And the only time that I've never had to wear glasses and been able to see from a distance, is, well, never actually. I never. It's the only time you ever do that is when you're actually going for an optometrist test, obviously, because they're literally putting glasses in front of your face. And also certain binoculars. Yeah, binoculars do this too because they're just magnifying what's in front of you. So it kind of works, but not perfectly. It doesn't work as well as you would want it to, obviously. So that's a concern too. If it's going to be an inch into my face and I still can't see the details clearly, well, what's the point?
Yeah, it's like you're literally gonna need to have like a setting where, because, and that's something else that I was thinking about. You could potentially use a VR type device as the lens thing that you look into at an optometrist. Why couldn't they do that with a virtual reality device? Because it could be almost exactly the same thing. They could adjust the amount of correction that is on your vision when you're looking through the virtual reality.
They could do that. But it's extremely expensive for an optometrist to do that. let alone to do that in a commercially viable device, right?
Well, think though, because the optometrist that machine that they use has a bunch of lenses and a bunch of stuff. If you
Yes.
could emulate that with software, it would be way cheaper. I mean,
It would
that's
but it would never be a one-to-one value. In saying that, there should be focusing controls on the VR already. I mean, cameras have this already. Right?
there is some focusing controls, but the focusing controls only seem to work, for me at least, for short distance. The focusing controls make everything look less blurry, but they don't fix the issue for me of being able to see at distance. It's still slightly blurry at long distance for me.
On another note, I want to try a game that has innate depth of field with VR. This is another topic, but I fucking despise depth of field in video games, alright? I do not like depth of field.
I turn it off pretty much.
And the
always.
reason for that is depth of field is a photography thing, right? It's used in photography and filming to draw the viewer's attention to a specific area. That's the point. But in a video game, I consider the entire monitor, right, as my eyes, as my viewport. So having the background blurry doesn't make any sense to me. I don't walk outside and look at a distant mountain on a hill and think, oh, that's fucking blurry. I'm just going to blur that, right? That doesn't happen
like,
to any...
I want to be able to see that worse. That sounds good.
That's what that's doing. Now, it's different if there's vignetting. And if you don't know what vignetting is a very subtle gradient added to the edges of the screen, right? Or of a photo or anything. And that just kind of blends everything in and it blurs the sides out a bit. And it's not supposed to, but it almost emulates that peripheral depth of field you have. Because people do that. You have that blurriness in your peripheral vision. But when I'm on a computer, what I'm looking at is not in my peripheral vision.
It's right in front of you.
Exactly. But I would love to see how that works. And like, let's say we play Fallout 4, right? VR. And we turn on depth of field. If that's a setting in that game, I want to shoot myself. Because why? Right? It's even worse.
It probably would be, to be honest.
Well, of course, because it's just going to be a one-to-one port. So why not?
So moving back on topic, we talked about the mental side effects of the VR, but in the meantime, there will be some physical side effects. I mean, you can think about like damage that you'll take from running into shit. You know, it's like,
man, I'll do that.
The other thing that you have to think about is that if VR gets so popularized and commercialized that it's a very common thing, we already have issues with people either being obese or being out of shape because they sit and don't do anything. And then if they become, addicted to VR, that's even less movement that you're doing, right? Because if it gets to that point where you're fully immersed and it's just your brain doing all of the actions, I mean, how do we maintain people's muscles? Does the VR machine have to shock people's muscles into staying non-atrophied?
It's going to be one of those things where I think they should do, that Nintendo, if they ever get into VR, they're going to be the best for this. And the reason for that is because every single fucking Nintendo game has a reminder saying that you should take a break after an hour of playing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you take a break, when you play an hour of Zelda or Mario, it tells you, you've been playing this game for an hour. Maybe you should go and take a break. Which you can ignore. It's usually in the bottom left of your screen, and you can just flat out ignore that. But imagine if that just comes up after like 2 hours, and it's just a massive fucking ear
You must
blast.
Take a break now, and it closes you out immediately.
I don't know.
It's like,
I don't think that'll happen either, because I'm not confident that companies will bother to take initiative to do that.
Or maybe I'm not sure, honestly, because that may produce issues with the immersion feeling, though. Because
it also, of course, it will. But I think it's a necessary. There have to be sacrifices for everything, and if one of the sacrifices is losing your immersion so that you don't fucking die.
Maybe worth.
That might be fine. I mean, you can't, I have sources, right? I cannot name these sources, but I have very credible sources that tell me that you cannot experience VR when you're fucking dead.
I don't know, maybe. But another thing to think about that is like when it comes to those that immersion and stuff. I mean, when does it become a legal issue? Like in the work field, if they have workers and they're using VR to train them, I mean,
Oh,
and
yeah,
that training, like say like for the military, I mean, the
which
military
would be great.
doesn't care. They'll do whatever they want. You know, they'll subject people to be all right. Do this training for 36 hours, and we'll force you to stay awake. And it's like okay, whatever. I guess I have to. And because I mean, they can use it for training. They can use it for if they're like needing help with their the military aircraft people to be able to build or
There
fix the
are
planes. You know.
there are a lot of great uses for virtual reality in the real world. I military, construction, healthcare, advertisements,
Mhm.
marketing.
Oh god, that's gonna be annoying. Like literally every building you walk by is just gonna have big, giant, colorful videos playing on it, and your brain's
Well,
just gonna be completely overloaded.
that was the problem that, yeah, I mean, our brains were already overloaded. We already get visual overload just walking down a busy street. Our brains have just become very good at tuning them out and making them more subliminal. We still remember them. Our brain still takes it in. It just kind of makes it a secondary focus. I imagine it would do the same for VR, but it probably wouldn't do it interesting. Like, sorry, immediately. So there will be a visual overload for some time, and you'll just get used to it. But imagine a pop up. Imagine that just getting a pop up.
Just like you're like sitting there walking, and all of a sudden you just like run into this wall, and it's just like, hey, you know,
I think that's the problem people have with the idea of the Google Glass.
hmm
Because the Google Glass is the same concept where you have well, that's augmented reality, and the idea is that you
hmm
have glasses that augment certain information onto your screen, and that's great. Like if you play a game like Deus Ex, and the idea is that the HUD that you see, your health bar, all that stuff, that's augmented reality. That's something that is being projected into your vision, right? But imagine, yeah, I don't like the idea of having ads put in there, but I guess it'll be fine because if somebody can invent ads for virtual reality, somebody else can invent ad blockers.
Sure, you know, it'll always be a part of it. And something else, before I forget, the whole idea of our brains being overloaded, something that's actually interesting about that is that that's one of the main developments of the human brain when you're younger, and that's
Yes.
one of the main issues with that people with autism have is
Ooh.
when your brain is developing at first, those first couple of years, you're absorbing every single bit of information in your environment at the same time. And eventually your brain learns to filter. It learns to filter important things out, and that's how we have as a society become able to do everything that we do, is we can filter out the important information that we're wanting to look at and getting rid of all of the
We also
fluff.
tend to build gradually. So
Yes.
you don't go from nothing, right, to Blade
hmm
Runner. That doesn't
Of
happen,
course not. It
right?
doesn't happen. It
Yeah.
takes forever.
Yes, exactly. So there is a really large gap between going from a very small city to New York City and having skyscrapers. Like Times Square is a really good example of information overload
Oh
because
yes,
there are
definitely.
monitors everywhere. You don't have to go there to see it. You can just Google images of Times Square. There are literally monitors just everywhere. You will be. It's a very weird experience.
And I guess that's a good example for showing that people can adapt to it though,
They
because
can, but it's still a thing
if
that you
you
have to adapt. Like, if you've never been to Times Square, that's still going to be something different that you have to get used to.
mhm.
That's
But
a.
people are able to easily get used to it, old, young. It
Oh,
seems that
yes.
it's possible. So
It's,
basically,
yes.
everywhere will look like Times Square, and that people won't have to pay for anything except for that real estate in the virtual or augmented world, rather.
Imagine Second Life, but in real life. I mean,
I
that's a fucking weird thought, okay? I understand the contradiction of that, but
Hey
that's the
man, VR
concept.
chat. VR chat is already there. That's what
uh,
that's what it is.
VR chat,
But let's
otherwise known as Second Life 2.
yeah, let's not. The VR chat could be its entire own episode, so we'll continue on that.
Oh,
So
man. Yeah.
not to jump back, but more on topic of of augmented reality and the uses, like the uses in the physical world. Like we were talking about being able to build stuff. It's going to be interesting that like fabricators and people that build like vehicles and stuff like that are going to be able to have augmented vision of you grab a piece and the augmented reality understands what that piece is and it can show you exactly where it needs to go and what you need to do.
For anyone who doesn't understand what augmented reality is, as opposed to virtual reality is when you stick a camera in front of your face, like the Oculus Rift, and you your mind enters that world, alright? Augmented reality, the only example you really need, as long as you've seen the movie, Iron Man and Iron Man's entire computer system. That's augmented reality. Or alternatively, Star Wars and all the holograms. Those are augmented reality. Because that is something that is literally augmenting reality. It's not a real thing that's happening, but it's information that is appearing in the real world. Generally, holographic displays are really good for this. Mass Effect is really cool for this, as well as Deus Ex, where you have big glass screens. And this, we've already seen this because of things like OLED screens are really good examples of this, where you just have a plastic screen, and it looks completely plastic, and to a normal person, it's just going to look like a transparent piece of plastic, but that thing is an electronic component, and it will have displays and information on it. And that's augmented reality. I really like augmented reality. I really, really want a glass monitor on my desk, because it just sounds really cool to me.
It sounds like it would, like the aesthetic of it would be really nice, just having a glass monitor that just shows the. Yeah.
You need a really good background wall, because you're projecting, because this is why monitors are still really good, right? Because if you have a glass, when you have a glass monitor, and there have been prototypes of these, when you see a glass monitor, technically it's just a big projector, and you're projecting the display onto everything. So it's like taking an image and having a big transparent image over everything. So if you don't have a black wall behind it, it's really hard to see anything.
So we've actually hit our time. So thanks for listening in on the Two Step Podcast. This was an episode on virtual reality. If you did like what you hear, make sure to like, subscribe, tell your mom, tell your friend. We try to be a little bit clean enough so that you can tell your immediate family about us. But if you can't do that, like we said last time, tell your dog. Give us the upwoofs.
If your dog likes swearing, it's fine.
Yeah, so it'll be fine. But anyways, that's it for us. We'll catch you on the next episode.